I'm not gonna lie. I do love me some Arc Raiders. I'm not gonna front. I've been playing that like every day for like the past like 2 months. Anyway, I watched the first episode already. So I'm gonna watch the second one now. You know what? There's only two more episodes or so. I'm gonna watch both of them. Alright.
Hello and welcome back to Embark Studios here in Stockholm, Sweden. In our last video we explored the original concept for Arc Raiders, an epic co-op machine hunting multiplayer game that never quite found its feet. The Arc Raiders that exist today emerged from that idea, but while the team at Embark had a world, a handful of enemy types, and a lot of tools and technology built, from a gameplay perspective they were essentially starting from scratch. Over the next few years they would have to establish how PvP could make the project more interesting, and then craft levels, enemies, and mechanics around that concept. This would prove to be the most challenging time in the project's history. Embark had launched the finals earlier than planned, which had given the Arc Raiders team a bit more runway, but now, years into development, the clock was ticking louder than ever. In this video we're going to cover several fascinating aspects of game design that happened in this period, from how the game looks and sounds, to how the levels were split apart in this period, from how the game looks and sounds.
Yo, this person got cornrows, bro. We're not gonna unlock that. I need that.
Game design that happened in this period, from how the game looks and
I mean, don't get me wrong, they got people with braided hair, but this is the first braided hair that looks like it's for men. Like men could wear it, you know what I mean? Damn, bro, we need that, bro. Let me get them cornrows.
Sounds, to how the levels were split apart and reassembled. The work that went into wrapping all of this into an extraction shooter form with interesting progression, what happened when they made the decision to drop free to play, and a lot more. But before the team could get to any of that, they'd have to answer one fundamental question. What aspects of the original pioneer concept would be retained, and what new ideas would come to the table?
Yo, what do y'all think about it being not free to play? Do you think it should be free to play? Me, I'm glad that you have to pay for it because this game already has a lot of cheaters. And when they start banning cheaters, it being not free to play would discourage them from keeping on making new accounts and paying $40 just to cheat again and possibly get banned again. So I'm glad that they have that because we need a reason to discourage them because there's a lot of cheaters from what I've seen.
A lot of people will leave the planet when it goes south. So we call that the exodus in our lore. And then we have the ecological collapse itself, the depopulation across the globe. And then we start our game much, much later when we are following a generation of people who has no concept of the world that we live in today. So we don't want to carry this sense of loss. We needed to establish that the machines themselves were able to dominate the surface. Naturally, we will be the one underground. If you want something from the top side, you ask a raider.
If we were to have a world realistically depicted in what had happened in this world, there would be nothing left. So we've taken loads of liberties in having things still have a material quality and a sort of nice appeal to it. You try to have this approach of having very naturalistic lighting. And that, for one, brings out a lot of inherent qualities in the things. We don't use a lot of color grading or anything like that because we want to balance everything to have a very naturalistic look. And then we can sort of push the things that need pushing in order to achieve this sort of contrast in between.
First of all, we needed to understand this new category of games. We spent a lot of time playing that. And for me, that was fairly easy. I played a lot of extraction shooter games before. There's great competitors out there and there's great games out there. So what can we learn? And We knew from the beginning that the world and its narrative wanted to be, there was something in the market that we felt like there isn't really a game here that speaks to you in that way. So if you're interested in this world and exploring it and learning more about its events and maybe participating yourself in the events of this world, that felt like a pretty clear opportunity for us instinctively. A lot of us were just feeling that needed to be there.
The original version of Arc Raiders was based in one massive open world map, but to make a game about looting and finding cover and exploring and listening to threats, the team was going to have to take an entirely new approach to level design. So what areas from Pioneer's world could they reuse, and where would they have to start from scratch? How would the levels in Arc Raiders look and play?
So initially we have this massive world. That was the initial ambition, that every map that we have now would be a server, and then it would be like a battle royale, sending you to the center where the big robot would be, and we would kill the servers as they would go, and so on.
Then after the pivot, obviously two things came up. A game that is about looting, where looting is central. It sort of implies that there is a density in the world. Even if you go into a sort of singular room or an apartment, it needs to hold up for a player's expectations of exploration.
I can't remember the exact number, but we used to have just a wide open world level where all these places existed. And I think today a single one of our maps has more props and actors in it than the whole of that world ever did by a factor of 2 or 3. So we inherited what we call Dam and Spaceport from Pile 1. But they've seen tremendous work put into them because those were obviously made for a very different game that didn't involve loot or interacting with the environment or even doors for that matter. It didn't exist back then.
Because we didn't have interiors, all buildings were empty, there was no props, because the game was not a game about the interiors, it was about moving towards the center, so we didn't care if there was a bed in... We still don't have toilets in our game. That's a nice curiosity. Back in the day, we didn't even have fall damage in the game. So at the first map, there's very horizontal spaceport. You could jump from the towers, shooting and gunning and all of that, right? So I had to change a bunch of those things and put ways for it to go down.
And then spaceport's much wider open in terms of its spacing, so there's a lot of open ground that's exposed, and there's some tunnels and cover to make your way between places, but it becomes a bit more of a risk thing. So you see players kind of moving in rings around places and then finding their ingress and doing what they can and then trying to get back out again. So it becomes a bit harrowing, especially as the round progresses, where players naturally start collapsing toward the middle, as opposed to Dam, where everyone sort of either swaps sides or stays mixed into the geography around the area. But in terms of gameplay, the Dam we're slating that for kind of our first map players get contact with. It has kind of a lot of easier affordances for a new player. It's got drastic height differences between like kind of the two halves of the map. It's got a good mix of interior and exterior. In the inheritance of Dam and Spaceport in particular, it was tricky over time to morph geometry and things in those levels to work for this type of game, because PvP especially was never a consideration for those. So suddenly things like sightlines and approach angles and dead ends and everything became much more critical to worry about, and making sure the affordance of PvP was correct. And it's even trickier when we have a third-person camera, which affords corner peeking and things like that.
And then Buried City, which is the last one that we've made, is made for this game. It's a more indoors actually map, and a lot of parkour, even though it's not a game about parkour, but there is a lot of ways for you to use the ceilings and the rooftops. It's a more PvP prone map, since it's the one we did with PvP in mind. The other two we adapted for it.
We knew the post-pivot that we needed one contrasting map that would be telling players more clearly that it's set on Earth. Because I think those monolithic structures, if you squint, you go, are we on Mars or are we on? So we wanted to ground the game on Earth, and this game is set in the south of Italy, deeply inspired by that region. And there's a volcano there, and there's a certain biome there. And also to sort of distinguish ourselves from other sort of post-apocalyptic worlds, which is usually sort of America-centric. So we started building out this other world that is Buried City.
where you can spend most of the round in only one or two buildings if you're really trying to, and hearing other players on other floors or building across an alley. And it's kind of an interesting mix between modern structures of like a hospital or a shopping center, and then because our game's based in Italy, it's a lot of old town, like rustic structures, and they're all collapsed and destroyed, and the city itself is half buried in sand. So sometimes you'll walk straight onto a rooftop, go into a building, and then come out on the first floor that is still on a sand dune somewhere, and then worm your way even further through some buildings and end up finally on street level near a park. We had people on the project who were very ingrained in that game loop of I'm running across massive environments and scaling buildings and firing rocket launchers at things, to this much more slow-paced, tactical, thoughtful gameplay. And we shifted kind of very gradually over time, and you'd still get pockets of like, oh, this feels bad, and trying to like shift the mentality from bombastic robot fights to tension-filled rounds to get through. So it was definitely a challenge to build things in a way that helped us transition from one to the other. And there's a lot of legacy stuff even today that we still have to parse through, that is the holdover from what the game was to what it needs to become.
I mentioned it in the opening of this series that I was a massive admirer of many of the team members at Embark, but there's actually one particular team in the studio who I've been dying to interview for years. Okay. Several members of the Arc Raiders audio team were previously part of the audio department at DICE, responsible for the award-winning soundscapes of those early Battlefield games, a series that pioneered brutally realistic weapon sounds. The audio design in Arc Raiders is critical to the experience, communicating so much to the players about the threats around them. But before we dive into that, I want to first know why realistic weapon noises have been a hallmark of this team.
It was very different at the time. So I think a lot of people reacted to it just sounding different. Right. And by that time, not even movies had gone that route, really. So it was sort of a novel thing, I guess. I did service in the Swedish military because I'm so old that it was like a mandatory thing. Because I was a sniper in the military, so we had to do lots of shooting and shooting different weapons, and also sabotage things, so we had to blow things up. So I sort of had a quite clear view of how violent the whole experience is, and it like really just turns your gut inside out. I see it as it's 50% of the experience. I mean, you see it and you hear it. So it has to be there. I think for me the ultimate goal is that players completely forget about them playing a game.
What is that cursor, bro? Whoever's playing with this cursor for real, bro, I pray for you, bro. I pray for you.
I just want them to be in a world that they think is there. And I think with sound you can get far, because we can record everything, we can make everything sound real. So it's very powerful. All the things that you put into the game, if you get them to breathe the same air and everything, it can feel like it's actually there. One thing that is very similar to the work we have done for years is that it uses just physics. So this has always been a huge challenge, and we've been recording everything, trying to like, okay, so now this rock will fall down, and how big is the rock? How small is it? How heavy is it? What does it fall onto? And you have to record all of that. Like, oh, I drop a rock on wood. I drop it in sand. I drop it here. Then I take a bigger rock. I drop that. Then I take many rocks. I drop those. And this tedious work but you have to do it. It's the groundwork that has to be done. And these robots, it's just physics and limbs. Okay, how do we do this? Okay, we need to measure all the joints and try to figure out what everything is going on inside of these robots. These are mechanical things. So we recorded mechanical things, hovering with drones and going up and down, and we use table fans, and we put stuff in the table fans when you start to destroy the drones, and then we just put pens in the in the fans and all sorts of things in the fan and recorded that. So we're just trying to extract all of this information. It's a challenge for sure.
Oh my goodness. Why would you do that? What are you doing? Oh my God. He's trying to kill a damn... Yo, you gotta keep running. What are you doing? How did you miss? I don't know how he's missing you, but...
Allow the things in there to be real. That's why we want to use, you know, gradual destructions on the drones. You would shoot up a thruster, and that disables its ability to fly. Of course it does. Like it's physics talking back to you, and there's something fun to play with physics. You don't need a health bar to tell you that. You just saw it, and you can listen to that, and you can make those calls. Trust in the human ability to decode that, listening and looking, and not relying on a UI to tell you the actual truth of what's going on. I think that's also something we've kept in spirit of, like, pursuing this trust in players that they can decode a world and allow their own sort of affordances of how they think the world operates to inform their decision making. I think that's something we've been really adamant about keeping for the player.
There are certain things that you have to start thinking of working with rather than working against, right? Like when you find that, oh, it's so intuitive and compelling to be able to shoot a thruster off of a drone and see it like spin out and fly into a wall, and that's awesome and that feels great. But then we also have to be mindful of the fact that, well, if there are a lot of walls and not a lot of room for the enemy to fly around in, it's probably going to fly into that wall and die. And we have to be okay with that, right?
Yeah, it has been a trick, and we've, again, gone through a lot of iterations. We used to put very bright orange glowy weak points on them to be like, you shoot here, please. But one thing that kind of diminished was we actually have all of the enemies physically fly around using forces, and the thrusters on them are the things actually providing those movement vectors. So what that did was it kind of really diminished the fact that you could shear off a thruster and you'd see its flight start to wobble, or even it would knock itself into an object and explode. And what it turned into was shoot the thing with the health bar and then the whole drone explodes, and we kind of lost a lot of that. And it's also not the most interesting gameplay to just only shoot at weak points.
You don't want to shoot purple zits. No purple zits.
This is the best game I've worked on for me, because it's a game about listening for things. I put so much work in all the Foley stuff, and now that you actually care about that, because now it's a game about listening and listening for other players. And so all the work we did early, because we built like a complete sandbox sort of audio engine type of thing. So now it shines, because now that's what the game is about. You're moving about, you're listening for things, because you really care about those things now, because everything is dangerous, and so you really want to know, like, is there someone there? Is there someone in the adjacent room? What is that person doing? You can hear them opening a locker and just going through the shelves and picking things up.
You hear people shuffling in the next room.
Players might choose this weapon because it's great for them in PvP. They're a player who can do really good flick aim and get a headshot cleanly, and that can be good for them in PvP, but maybe it doesn't serve them so well in fighting drones. So how can we bake in some more qualities to these weapons that give them a bit different specific purpose that you might choose to bring that? So for example, if you're a player who loves shotguns, that's great at close range, and it's great at things that are kind of generally unarmored unless you have like a slug round. So what if we then made our heavy caliber weapons penetrate drone armor very effectively? And now you're like, well, I don't actually like this breech loader rifle because it's slow and cumbersome, and if I miss, I'm reloading forever, but it will punch clean through a drone's armor. So that's, a choice I'm being afforded now to offset maybe the weak sides of the weapons I do prefer.
We add things to the weapons. I mean, if they look like something that has electrical moving things, then we add those little aspects to it as well. and all the weapons are built from different layers. We have the mechanics separated, this separated, that separated, the echo separated, all the sort of distances that we've been recording them. We split that up and fade it. What you hear when you fire a gun is a large amount of recordings that from the different angles and distances, and then we sort of put that together into a gun model. So if someone is firing from far away, you hear a far away gunshot of that caliber or whatever. So it's built out of 1,000 small parts. And then you can also stick an electric motor in there, and it will just work with this whole model. It's very consistent, and you can sort of just distill everything, but they all come from the same source. So it becomes much easier to do something that sounds really believable.
Embark had established their new vision for Arc Raiders, a game that attempted to blend PvE with player-on-player combat, a game that attempted to blend the intimate exploration of their detailed levels with the tension of extraction shooters. But it was finding the right blend of all of this that was going to prove their biggest challenge. In resetting Arc Raiders to this extraction game experience, the studio embarked on a difficult plan. These games are notoriously tough to balance, not just ensuring that players of all skill levels have a rewarding experience, but that people who play solo don't get swamped by those who play teams. That risk is rewarded without being overly cruel, that the game can create tension around its goals without stunting player progress. In a single-player game, it's very easy to give players cookies for doing a good job. In most multiplayer games, skill and teamwork are the tools to winning. This is what makes a game like The Finals, a competitive round-based shooter, a good candidate for free-to-play. But in a game where players are going to require satisfying progression, where survival is so important, the team was really struggling to find this right balance between risk and reward. So before we can talk about progression, we need to first talk about the decision to drop free to play. This decision massively helped issues the team were having with the progression, because drip feeding content or artificially holding back progress felt at odds with the game. But putting a price tag on the experience was also going to present some challenges. So where did this decision come from, and how exactly did it change Arc Raiders?
It's actually in many ways made it drastically easier. In free-to-play, you need to, in some ways, make things a little stickier than they would be otherwise, take a little more time, a little more grind, just so players are more incentivized to, stay in and stick into those loops and keep playing your game, and then ideally are incentivized to then spend money on that game. So for this...
But if the game is not free to play, you're going to play that game because you paid for it. That's basically what I'm thinking. Because if it wasn't free to play, if it was free to play, I wouldn't feel much pressure to do much, you know what I mean? Unless they give me like crazy incentives, but because I paid for it, it's like, I need to get my money's worth. I need to feel like I experienced this game to the point where I don't feel like playing it anymore. I haven't gotten to that point yet, but that's how I look at it.
Type of title, it made it kind of hard to respect the player's time in some of these areas around crafting or sessions and things like that, because we were almost had a hand on their forehead going, slow down a little bit, where it felt a little bad. So as soon as that decision came down, it made us able to make things take the amount of time that felt appropriate in a lot of ways. So crafting no longer has timers on it that you have to wait out, or the amounts of things we're asking you to collect are a little more rational, or match the effort and outcome match each other a little more precisely, and things like that. So it's helped a lot, but it does, on the other side, again, launching at a price point, we still need ways to monetize that doesn't feel predatory or things like that. So that's also been an interesting challenge.
It's a pure market.
I know one good thing that they did. I remember when the game launched, just about every outfit, every skin was like $20. It was like $20 a skin. And I'm like, $20 a skin? I'm like, the game's $40. The first skin that you're showing me is $20. So it's like, I'm basically paying $60 for the game if I decide to buy a skin first week. I'm like, I'm like, I don't know if I want to spend $20 a skin yet, you know. And also the first group of skins was ass. I think anybody would say that the first group of skins was ass. But then again, we didn't really understand the era and the style choice. You know what I mean? But just off of just coming into the game, not understanding the style choice, not understanding the world, not understanding like how people are getting their clothes or whatever. Just coming in the game, you're like, damn, these outfits is ass. You want me to spend $20? But they ended up reducing the prices to like, now you're seeing skins for like $15. But it's not just a skin; it's a bundle. Even when it was $20 was a bundle, but now the bundles you're seeing like $15, or it's like equal to like $13 or even 11. So they did better with that. I mean, especially if you spend $40 for the game, it's like, bro, like you already got my money. Like, come on now.
It's like, how do we adapt to what the market wants? A free-to-play game would attract a lot of players, and we can maybe get tens of millions of players for a while. But as we started building what would become the rebirth of our creators, we started looking at, it was actually the team who started asking questions. Free-to-play, is this the right model for us?
One of the early tenets we set for ourselves is that we wanted to be more approachable than kind of the standard extraction shooter, which can result in just this poverty loop of I have nothing, I go in with my knife, I fail, I try again, and it is very tricky, right? Because anytime the game slaps you for doing PvP in a PvP game, that feels bad, right? Woo! So it is tricky, and there's kind of passive ways you can do it and active ways you can do it, and some of the passive ways is just leaning into some of the tenets of extraction games or similar, like you're expending resources, it's risk to you to do this fight because you don't know whether you're going to win, so you stand to lose. And having that fear of losing your stuff or losing that fight, hopefully, is something that gives a person pause. A more active solution is doing things like world activities, quests, or other types of challenges that don't necessarily require multiple people, but are greatly benefited from having multiple people doing it. So getting people to temporarily form alliances. And that's actually kind of our unicorn in some ways, is getting those tenuous alliances to happen organically. You can obviously party up deliberately and go in with your friends, but that's a very different dynamic than seeing somebody in the wild and feeling out the situation. And we have a lot of nonverbal communication efforts that we've put into the game. So through our ping system, our emote system, things like that. So you can kind of convey a lot of meaning with one input.
I like both solo and groups. When I go with groups, I'm very aggressive, maybe way too much.
Everybody is.
I'm always the first one to die. But when I'm playing solo, I'm actually quite stealthy. I like that nature of the game, that you can actually decide what you want to do, right? So when I'm playing with the team, I try to every session put a different hat. Like sometimes I'm like, I'm gonna shoot, no questions asked. I shoot first. And just to create that in the playtest as well, because that's how the game will be played. I think some players will be like, I don't know, they accumulated too much wealth, now they want to spend it, they're gonna go with all the weapons, everything, and they're gonna shoot at sight. Yep. And sometimes they'll be poor trying to get their stuff, sometimes they'll just want to do their quests. And I like the fact that our game allows for all of that.
Yeah. That's what makes the game very, very...
To launch a new game today, irrespective of what platform you're on or what type of game it is, it's harder and harder and harder to break into kind of a critical mass that makes any financial sense. I think game developers out there are really scratching their heads thinking, I made a great game. And often you see today that if you've done a really good job, you'll see players jump on, they'll stay there for a while, but guess what? Then they drop out and go and do something else. A big component of that is due to the fact the game didn't have the attributes or instruments needed to retain the players. So it's on us as game developers, it's not the gamers' fault. We need to do a better job of making sure that they have a need and a desire to stick around playing our game. And what can we learn from our previous games? Having gotten finals into the market, we saw a big peak, like a crazy amount of people, then we saw a drop off. Now, because of hard work, we're seeing people return to the game and we're seeing a growth curve coming back. But I think it's always going to be in what's the long-term motivation for a player to play. It sits in the progression, in the meta layer, making sure that there are meaningful things to do in the game apart from just running around and shooting people. That's probably our biggest challenge and will remain our biggest challenge when we launch the game and after launch.
Primarily, I think our biggest concern right now is what does the end game look like? Because what often happens in these games is they either have a seasonal reset mechanic, so there's just always a clock on what you're doing, and then that tends to culminate in towards the end of that, players bringing all their best, shiniest things and just duking it out until the reset happens. And so there's been a lot of talks about how we actually handle that. What do we lean into for PvE? What types of events can we do? Seasonal storylines, things like that. So getting that shaped up, I think, is kind of what I'm most keen to figure out, because players even internally are like, well, I have amazing gear. My stash is full of amazing gear. I very rarely die. Nothing is asking me to use that. And part of the answer is the giant robots coming back in a form that makes sense for this game. But then what's the framework for highly skilled or highly wealthy players to then go and challenge themselves or be challenged by and earning additional awards? And we're going to have, you know, kind of the traditional things like battle passes and stuff where you can work through those, but what sort of extra motivation can we give to those players who need something to do?
We've covered a bunch of areas of design in this video, but there is one large mechanical elephant in the room: the machines themselves. In the first video in this series, I mentioned how one of the biggest technology investments the studio had made was in the locomotion technology driving the movement of these machines, a brand new way to create believable, intimidating enemies that adapted to having parts of their structures blown off. The struggle to get this technology to work was ongoing throughout the entire development of Arc Raiders, and continues today. So in the next episode in this series, we're going to explore how the arcs themselves were built, the technological struggles the teams have undergone to wrestle satisfying gameplay out of them, and what their groundbreaking technology means for the future of this game, and perhaps many more. See you then.
Nice. Arc Raiders is so good right now, not gonna lie. And it's such a good like streaming game to watch a streamer play it, because every time they go up top, every time they get into a raid, you could have such a unique experience. And it's not just with the arcs or what you find, but I guess the biggest thing is with the players. It's the player experience when people turn on their microphones and they interact. Sometimes people negotiate, or sometimes they might just shit talk, or they might decide to team up. You know what I mean? On some like, hey, let's lock in together and let's go take down this big matriarch, or help me take this bombardier out, or shoot, you know, hey, I know we're in solos, but you could team up with me and we can go take out other raiders and we can split the loot. Like whatever you want to do. If you want to be on some villain arc, or if you want to be a Captain Saver Raider and be happy, not happy, but be like a hero and go find raiders that are in trouble. Maybe their flare went up and they're not that far from you, and you want to go save them because you got a defibrillator on you, and you're close enough to make verbal contact with them, and you're saying, "Hey, I know you went down. Don't give up. I got a defib. I'm coming." And you can go to them, and they'll thank you, and they feel so much better about their experience in the raid because they died to a bombardier or a damn bastion, and they thought, damn, it's over for me. I'm not going to get to no extraction zone, and I'm in solos, so I have no teammates to help me. And you just came and got them back on their feet, and that's something that they couldn't have expected. You know, it's something that just happened to happen because you were in the game, and you decided that you wanted to be that guy or that girl. And it's just these unique experiences that make you like keep coming back, you know? So I never played an extraction shooter. This was my first extraction shooter. And I don't know if Tarkov was like this. I don't know. But shoot, I'm down for extraction shooters, especially with the the PvP proximity chat. You gotta have those. And I think that proximity chat in Arc Raiders was so powerful that Marathon, the other extraction shooter game made by Bungie, I believe, initially they didn't want to do proximity chat. Initially they were saying no, proximity chat is not what we want because people might be nasty and we want people to have a safe experience, a safe, pleasant experience. We don't want people getting, I guess, harassed verbally by toxic players. But look how Arc Raiders turned out. The proximity chat is the highlight of Arc Raiders. You got people like Burnt Peanut that's that's that basically skyrocketed through his proximity chat engagements in Arc Raiders. And I never heard of Burnt Peanut until Arc Raiders. And when you look at him on Arc Raiders, my man he's getting like almost 200,000 viewers a stream. And that's across different platforms all combined, like YouTube and Twitch and whatever else he streams on. Like, it's insane. I don't think his I don't think he would have been getting that many views if it wasn't for the proximity engagement. I think he still would have been getting views, but the engagements is what makes his stream so much more unique than the average streamer that's streaming the game, you know? So now Marathon is adding proximity chat, and I don't know what that looks like yet because I haven't seen gameplay of the proximity chat with that game, but you know, I'm pretty sure that's going to help Marathon a lot. So anyway, let's watch this next one real quick. I was going to do 2 videos, but I think I might just knock it out in one. Is this episode 3? Yep.
Hello and welcome to the final video in our series on the development of Arc Raiders. In the previous 2 episodes, we detailed how Arc Raiders changed from the fast-paced co-op giant machine hunting game to a more intimate and tactical PvPvE extraction shooter. But the dream of taking down large, intelligent machines never died. In fact, it may be the defining technology pillar of this entire project. I say maybe because for years Embark has been struggling to wrestle results out of this new tech. You see, early in Arc Raiders development, the team at Embark decided to make a gamble on an emerging technology, to make machines that would seem to move with intelligence. It's not AI in either the traditional gaming sense or in the new generative sense, but rather adopting breakthrough machine learning research in the field of real-world robotics. A way to allow the machines in this game, both large and small, to move realistically, allowing them to cross complex terrain, to react, fall, and stumble when under enemy fire, to walk, run, and jump even when one of their limbs has been blown off. I spend a lot of time talking to a lot of smart people to understand how exactly this technology works, the groundbreaking new game design language it opens up, and frankly how difficult it is to get any of this to work effectively. But before we get to any of that, let's first quickly remind ourselves about the machines that populate this world, instruments of the game's antagonist, Arc. We filmed these interviews in 2024.
Wait, what the hell? Was that? Was a surveyor vault? Was a surveyor Arc shooting back? I've never seen that before.
Instruments of the game's antagonist, Arc. We filmed these interviews in 2024, around a year before the game's release date, so much of what the interviewees are talking about has itself changed in the 12 months since. What work is left to do, and how is Arc Raiders likely to evolve before it's released?
I've never seen the surveyor ball like attack anybody. He just be minding his own business.
Internally, we kind of broadly define the enemies into aerial enemies and ground enemies, just because of how we have to build them and how they behave tends to most cleanly fall into those 2 categories. And then within those categories, it tends to be like lighter enemies, fodder style enemies that, if ignored, they'll hurt you but aren't a tremendous deal to take down, up to much heavier enemies that are a significant threat to you and take a lot of effort. So on the low end of our aerial enemies, we have the Wasp, which is just a pretty light aerial drone that is somewhat erratic in its movement and has a light machine.
Listen, say what you want about a Wasp, but you get 3 Wasp on you, and they shred, bro. They got like a built-in stitcher inside of them that shreds, bro.
Gun, and it will pepper you with bullets. And then its sort of big brother version is the Hornet, which has significant armor plating, which necessitates the player to either use maybe a type of grenade to take it out. They need to flank around behind it and take out its thrusters, which are unarmored. So the Rocketeer is an aerial enemy, and it's kind of what it sounds like. It's just a very large aerial drone, fairly heavily armored, and will kind of saturate areas of threat with rockets from a distance, so it kind of flushes players out.
If you want to just shoot for the center, maybe it takes a few more hits, but it's easier to hit, and each hit will kind of knock it back. So if it was getting ready to shoot at you, you can kind of throw its aim off just by knocking it a little bit. And that has always been the case. So there's always this concept of like a popcorn enemy, where it's like you get a lot of them and you kind of, they don't take much damage to destroy, but it's like pop, pop, pop. It feels very satisfying.
And then our ground enemies are primarily our answer to interior spaces, which again in Pio 1 weren't really a factor. It was a building you would run through at 50 kilometers an hour because our move speed was so high then it didn't matter. Whereas now you are slowed down and are interacting with containers, and we need a way to present threats to players in interior spaces. So we've gone through a lot of types in that area, but today we have what we just charmingly call the fireball, which is basically this metallic sphere that can roll quite easily in interiors, and then it opens up and shoots fire at you.
The initial need was to have an enemy that was really fast and that could really catch up to players, right? Like we needed something that would be able to traverse our world in the game is beautiful, but it has quite a lot of complex geometry, and you know, there's all of this verticality and all of these slopes, and it's quite difficult for many ground moving enemies to navigate. So we were like, okay, we need something that can be on the ground, but that can really go after players when they're like zooming around and jumping and bolting and going with their snap hooks and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we were like, oh, wait a second. A ball.
Yeah. You don't need legs, you don't need wheels, you don't need
balls
tracks.
and fireballs.
Just roll.
It just goes to where it needs to be,
Jumping
right?
at
And we have
you.
another one called the Tick, which is kind of a creepy little spider-ish robot, and it can cling to walls and like hop off of them, and it will summon other enemies if you get close to them.
I'm not gonna lie,
So the loot
ticks are really
from
cool.
the AI are the ones that are nicer. So like you find the core from one of the enemies, it's a grenade. There's an enemy that call other enemies. The piece of it does the same, so you can trap another player. Just like throw the thing, and enemies will drop on them. So like we are trying to make you use of the loot that way.
The first step on the journey to realistic machines is creating a world in which physics are accurate. Most games will animate their characters irrespective of the laws of physics, but if Embark was going to create a world in which intelligent robots could walk around as they saw fit, they had to ensure that laws like mass and gravity were consistent, that the world of Arc Raiders was capable of creating emergent moments between player, machine, and environment.
Our enemies are fully physicalized. All parts, everything, they use physics to an extent that sometimes it's even a challenge. Because if we really want a drone to do a barrel roll, it can't because of their weight and the thrusters. All of that is super realistic in the game, right? So it's not easy to justify it doing a barrel roll. And all the parts of the drones as well can be peeled off, and the drone will actually react to that. If it has one thrusters left, it's going to try to shoot, and that is going to impact its trajectory and all of that.
I think it's a choice between control versus emergence, really. Because, like, if you want to be able to say, like, look at a game like Dark Souls or something, Bloodborne, where they have these enemies that have really specific patterns, and it's like they want the player to learn, okay, after 3 seconds it's going to move to the left, and then it does this move which takes X amount of time, and then something else happens. If you want that kind of control, you cannot use physics.
Because a lot of design philosophies, especially with enemy design, are really difficult to pull off when you have this type of systems, because it's so much about pattern recognition, right? Like you have an enemy moving in a certain way and like, oh, that's the opening for the attack, I can go in. Or you as a player know that like, if I do this, I'm gonna get this reaction from it, and that's gonna happen every time. And that's what games like Dark Souls, like Monster Hunter kind of rely upon. And we had this ambition to have boss fights in that same arena of like Dark Souls, Monster Hunter, like having all of that compelling pattern recognition. But then we also realized that, well, if you knock it in a certain way and the slope is a little bit angled and maybe someone else is standing somewhere else and firing off a grenade, then that is not going to work. You're not going to have the pattern that you thought.
Like if you've got a big enemy flying in the middle of a pack of smaller drones and you throw a grenade and it explodes, and then maybe one of the engines flies off and hits this other one, which then like crashes to the side. You get all of this stuff, kind of these cinematic moments that are really memorable, and that's not something anyone's designed as such. It's just something that's happened naturally, which is really cool, and like we thought it was worth that.
Exactly.
Versus having to struggle with, okay, maybe we don't get to do exactly what we want all the time, but we get these cool, memorable moments that can just occur without anyone having planned them.
Yeah, look at that. That's so random how he just came in like that.
Getting physics to work for barrels or grenades is one thing. Getting physics to work for drones with parts that can be blown off is a whole other challenge. But getting physics to work for machines the size of buildings is an entirely different story. This is due to the nature of most game engines and physics simulations. Games are not used to calculating mass at that scale, and having enemies weighing thousands of tons creates challenges in how they move and interact within the world. Because sand in video games isn't sand, it's geometry, texture, and shaders. Because rock and dirt doesn't crumble under the weight of heavy things in most games.
Inside the simulation, there are just numbers at work here. So the weights of things are there. So you set, this leg weighs 6 tons, or, the center of mass of this robot should be 10,000 kilos or something like that. But to get it to support its own weight, you have to set values on how much strength each limb has. And when you start dealing with like very, very insane numbers to try and support the thing, you get behaviors which are sort of uncanny. Very, very stiff legs that sort of like have a lot of energy, but they do small little inputs like this against the ground, and you get sort of like rigid bounciness happening. And if you want to dial that down, then you get something that can't support itself and it starts to trip or fall over and this sort of thing. So there's this middle ground which was really hard to find to make it look natural, but also give it the power to actually locomote.
It is a classic game issue that when you have physics, they are not penetrating each other, right? You have things and it's resting on top of something. You don't get it buried deep beneath, right? And if we're talking about these big bosses, they would bury themselves into concrete or anything, right? Not just sand. But we can't really do that in games without a lot of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah, it really breaks the illusion when you want to see like an at foot kind of like come towards Luke's speeder and go, and that doesn't happen. What happens is it kind of goes like this, and you're kind of like, huh, I thought this thing was supposed to be huge and big, right? It just doesn't sell it.
Early in the development of Arc Raiders, the team at Embark decided to establish a team to explore the possibility of using groundbreaking research in the field of robotics to enable the enemies to locomote independently of any preset animations. Decision-making would be made using game logic, but how a machine got from A to B would be decided by a brain, generated using machine learning.
You know those Boston Dynamics videos where they try and teach a bipedal robot how to jump up on a box?
Yeah.
That's kind of like what Arc Raiders is trying to do, but instead their robots are way bigger and they have way more legs. And crucially, they have to be able to do something that traditional games can't. And that's when you blow off one of those legs, those robots have to be able to adapt.
I think, as I've been told, like their objectives has been much closer to the same objectives as Boston Dynamics has, rather than game design problems of like literally figuring out how these machines will navigate with their own vision, and like they had to be physically accurate also, where you put the engines and the downwash and all that has to be accurately, they have to be in accurate locations for it to work. Like what's exciting and what's still exciting is the fact that using this technology for our locomotion system is the losing limbs and still it wants to stand up. It just opens that door to the imagination of what is self-preservance like, and how that speaks back to the players. To us, that when we saw that, at least, that is an exciting prospect of a new type of experience that players haven't had before, I think. They're literally playing against a machine.
The ML only did at that point locomotion. So that was responsible to make it go from point A to B, and that's it. No ML in decision making whatsoever. So it depends a little bit on the model. So some models consume a lot of memory. That is maybe the biggest consideration. And some language models and such consume gigabytes of memory. But this locomotion does not consume that much. So I'd say the expensive part of ML is what we call observations. And that is actually not really ML per se. That is just how the agents get information about the world. So they don't see the world the way a player sees it, of course. They have to, if they want to see a wall, you have to sort of line trace or do a shape cast to see it or detect it. And we need to do a lot of those, maybe thousands. So they get an idea of what kind of environment they're in. At least this is the case for locomotion.
The road to getting this locomotion system to work has been long and difficult, and it involves several different stakeholders from within the team, from animators to technical animators, artists and gameplay engineers. It also required the studio to look outside into the world of research.
I did my PhD in mathematics and thought pure mathematics was a bit too dry, so I found applications, and the application I found was applying machine learning to biology. So I worked on hereditary diseases like diabetes and Crohn's disease and stuff like that, and tried to identify the target genes that were involved with that through machine learning. Like, it's completely revolutionized the field. I think there's very soon we'll see a Nobel Prize to Google DeepMind for their work on biology.
A month after this interview, Google DeepMind's Demis Hassabis and Dr. John Jumper were co-awarded the 2024 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. Damn, man, they got some smart ass people working on the physics and all that stuff in this game, bro. See, I told y'all, man. Well, I can't say I told y'all. I don't know if I know I said something in the past about how once I started hearing about the machine learning stuff with arc raiders and how unique the arcs are going to be moving, and how it wasn't like coded a certain way for the arcs to only move a certain way, I knew that this was going to be a banger of a game. Because one of the biggest things that be destroying games when it comes down to PvE is where the NPC that's supposed to be trying to come at you doesn't know how to come at you, and you're just playing ring around the rosy with it. And it's like there's no real difficulty as far as the skill level. It's if you raise the difficulty in the game, rather than the NPCs being smarter and outmaneuvering you, they just become a sponge, a bullet sponge. When you get the difficulty level to be higher, they just take more ammo to kill, and you take less ammo to die. Like, that's not a difficulty setting. Anyway.
Applications of machine learning, like I'm certain of it, yeah.
Really early on we had, there was a test where even though the gait, so the way it walked was kind of meh, we threw boxes at it. So we were just throwing these, I think there were 100 kilogram boxes, and it just reacted, and that's when you see, holy shit, there's a magic here. From an animation perspective, I'm used to, okay, how would I break this down into, let's say, a sequence of animations that can, in this case, it would be, we can throw a box at this from any angle, in any direction, in any weight or whatever. And I'm thinking of the animation complexity, so, well, how do I handle arbitrary complexity? Well, then I need to have infinite amount of animations or blending, and that is just a nightmare, which is why you often see things like, if I punch you in the shoulder in a video game, you just do this, cave-in animation, or, the can sequence.
And the funny thing with this tech, I think, is that it's kind of partially ruined animations in other games for me a little bit. So now when I look at other games, I'm like, wait, the center of gravity is off here. Like, this doesn't feel right anymore, and it really annoys me.
A connoisseur of animation, I hear.
But everything else they do looks so good. Like when they walk like on a flat ground, like that's an authored animation cycle that looks really good, and animates me like, I want to convey this sense of weight, this sense of menace in this gait, or like this sense of joy or whatever. And we just take whatever the robots give us, and it looks frequently kind of shitty in comparison to these like Disney walks, right? Yeah. But on the other hand, when you throw something at it, or when it slips, or when the ground is not even, our robots do the right stuff. And their robots are not robots. They don't do the right stuff. They just like apply some kind of one out of their 20 animations that they have, and it doesn't fit.
The process of training these brains is complicated. It essentially requires somebody to give the brain certain conditions, have it train using those conditions, and then testing the brain in a machine and seeing what it does right and what it does wrong. An example of a condition could be, if an enemy is far away, run fast to get to them, or if a human enemy is firing at you, attempt to jump over them. The core problem with this work is that once one of the brains is baked, you can't simply tweak its behavior. You have to go back to the original conditions, retrain the entire brain, and then test to see if the new brain works better. And this causes a problem, because the solutions that a human might have can be very different to the solutions these robot brains come up with.
We found some fun playing against the big ML enemies, right? And the problem was to replicate that fun. It was very difficult because it's not predictable. It's very hard to just say, do this, right? It doesn't. It doesn't follow orders that way. You have to train it and teach it. And sometimes it finds weird ways to get to do things more efficiently, like removing all the legs, but 2 from the ground, because that's faster for it. But then it looks silly. It doesn't become a menacing enemy that we wanted, right? So we always had that dilemma dealing with ML that is not the predictability part of it.
The damn agent learned that if I just shove my foot into the ground really hard, faster than the server can keep up, I can use the penetration to bounce myself, right?
A typical example was that we give it a cookie when it reaches or when it moves towards a flag, right? And when it gets to the flag, we move the flag to a new place, right? At some point in time, we try to...
Did you just see that the Ark learned how to exploit the game? That's crazy.
Train it, like the closer it was to the flag, the bigger the reward it got, like the better the cookie, right? And what it learned, of course, was that it runs up to the flag and then stops, like with its nose, like this close to the damn thing. And it's like, I know if I touch it, it goes away and stuff starts hurting. Like that's much worse. But you're touching something that I think has been a huge problem, which is the interaction between game designers and the ML loop. Like that's been really hard.
Yeah.
For a long time, I felt like the game designers would ask us something, and we'd be like, we think that's possible. Let us get back to you. And then 3 months later, we'd be like, yeah, now we have the stomp attack request, and they're like, oh, we worked around that now.
The team at Embark has tackled these issues with a number of solutions, one being training the brains on actual animation data to help guide their movement, almost like giving the brain a template to work from. And another has been, instead of baking one brain for each machine, giving them multiple brains that focus on specific tasks. This in particular has proved helpful for both getting the machines to work properly and empowering developers in how they tweak machine behavior.
And I think it's only fairly recently that we've managed to get the locomotion components we've been working on predictable and diverse enough that they feel like they have building blocks that they can use by themselves, instead of like involving us in every single step. They can be like, okay, I know I have the stop behavior, I have the patrol behavior, I have the assault behavior, and I have the melee behavior. Now I can combine these as I want to and create good game design with it.
As you've probably talked about, it's very tricky to get ML to do things with extreme intent, and we've tended to try to ask it to do jobs it's bad at, which is telegraph and attack with precision. So trying to work through those problems where we've got this thing that walks very competently across complex terrain, how do we turn that into a game that feels satisfying?
Like our reinforcement learning and machine learning efforts into locomotion is something that is being used today to some extent, maybe not to the full extent that we were hoping as we started, and that proved to be far more difficult than we expected. But we are using it today. It's a part of the game, and it makes the game feel very different than any other game. And that technology will evolve over time. So we were just a little bit too early with it, and didn't maybe have enough resources and knowledge to figure it out at the time.
I think we are getting to a point now where we are getting more and more comfortable with it. So that's why we want to keep it. It's still an ambition. That's why we always have at least one enemy in the game with it. But it is much more complicated. We just did a new prototype of one big enemy like those without machine learning, with procedural animation, and it got the results, as I said, like I can say just stop there, put the leg here, and do things like that. It was much simpler to produce. But we had a couple animators full-time on it for 6 months. Right. So that's the trade-off there. Yeah.
Arc Raiders is launching into one of the least predictable video game markets ever, where players demand exciting new experiences that they can play with their friends for days, weeks, and months at a time. But this reality hasn't stopped Embark from taking bold risks when it comes to gameplay or technology. In both Arc Raiders and the finals, it's clear to see how much of a thirst the studio has for evolving any given genre, even if it takes years of experimenting. And while I've been embedded in the development of Arc Raiders, it's also been clear to me that they're not scared to tear up lukewarm ideas that don't reach their lofty goals. Time will tell what type of audience Arc Raiders ultimately receives. We produce these videos long before the game's release. But one thing is for sure, no matter how Arc Raiders launches, in Embark's hands this game is going to continue to evolve, to take risks, and to push technology and, more importantly, gameplay forward.
Oh man, so good. Yo, imagine what gaming is going to be like if other developers start to use this machine learning tactic for like other future games. I'm thinking obviously it's machine learning. It's for the NPCs. So I'm thinking possibly even single player games where it's story based single player games where you're fighting these robots and stuff where you're not just coasting through the game because you know you're you ever play the game and it's like you know that all right, if I do this thing right here, if I move right over here, then the NPC is either not gonna see me or I can just ring around a rosy around this pole to fight this NPC, and it'll never be able to hit me because it's too stupid to realize what I'm doing, that I'm exploiting it by ringing around a rosy it over here, and then the NPC doesn't figure you out and it doesn't like this fucking get you because it just can't figure out what you're doing. It's just following a program. But with the machine learning allows for the experience. Every encounter with any NPC is going to be unique because they're not programmed to come at you a specific way, you know. And I'm just curious. Maybe they'll have that with not just robots as far as NPCs that are robots, but maybe NPCs that are like human NPCs, and they'll come at you. They'll use tactics and they'll try to flank you and just I mean call it AI or whatever you want to call it, but if it's gonna make the gaming experience more unique and more realistic, I guess I'm all for it. If they come out with another Uncharted type of game and you have stuff like that in it, like the NPC, the NPC behavior is the main reason why I didn't buy that Star Wars game with the girl. That was she wasn't a Jedi. She was like a thief or a scoundrel or some underground girl. It was like Star Outlast or Outlaw. I think it was Star Wars Outlaw. I was so excited for that game. I was so excited for that game when I first saw the trailer for it. I was like, oh damn, another Star Wars game? Yes. I love the last two Star Wars games that that Respawn have made. The people that are behind Titanfall 2 and Apex. They did um, two um, Star Wars games when you playing with the as the Jedi, and those games were great. And I'm like, wow, another Star Wars game. Okay, okay, it's not Respawn doing it, but it's hey Star Wars. Who's doing it? Oh, who's doing it? Ubisoft. Ubisoft been having a rough run, but it's Star Wars. And then I'm watching the gameplay, and I'm watching the NPCs, and the NPCs are moving around like they don't have a brain at all. And it's like the game just looks so easy from the gameplay that I saw. Like, the game just looks so easy because there's no challenge because the NPCs are not they're not maneuvering in a way where you have to think really, you know. And it turned me off watching how the NPCs was moving and how easy it was to exploit them. And yeah. But anyway, I don't want to drag this on any longer. It's already over an hour. But I hope that other games are able to take notes from this and maybe even add this machine learning to their game somehow. I hope it's not something that's just patented patented by Arc Raiders by Embark Studios, like the Nemesis, the Nemesis system from the Shadow of War series, that Lord of the Rings game style, the Shadow of War, Shadow of Mordor. Um, I hope that what Arc Raiders is doing with their machine learning is not similar, or is not something that's only for them, like the Nemesis system is for WB with the Lord of the Rings franchise game, Shadow of War. Because I would love to see that in way more games moving forward. But alright, I'm gonna leave it like that, man. Let me know your thoughts. I don't know if they're gonna do any more episodes, but let me know your thoughts on this. Anything I may have missed out, anything about your experience, anything you agree on. I'm reading everything below, so whatever you put down there, I'm gonna see it. Catch you on the next one.